Welcome everybody to another episode of Chaddy Issues. I believe it's episode 7. And it's Chaddy Issues because you worry about your issues and I'll worry about Chaddy issues, and together we can make things grow. When I first began doing what I'm doing, it started on a run many years ago. I started thinking of ways to give back, but it was all about getting parents, mothers and fathers, and eventually children on board. But I always knew I'd attract the right person. I just didn't think I'd attract it so quickly. And Chat Issues is about real stories, real issues. And speaking of real, it's an honour to have a gentleman, fine young man by the name of Joey Mowbray here today.
It's Joseph. Yeah, he prefers Joseph.
I don't mind. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Joseph. Joseph, when you walked in the room, I saw a walking example of strength. And at 24 years old, I don't even think I would have been your toenail. You've already lived through more than most of us can imagine. Removed from home, I believe, at a young age.
Yeah.
Did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself during that initial time?
During that time, I was, angry at the world. I was a young kid, I wasn't ready for that type of process.
How old?
I think it was about 8 or 9 when it first happened. Before that, I lived with my grandma as well, so I was taken off my parents, like even younger than that.
Yeah.
But it was around 8 or 9, I moved into the childcare system. And I guess that's where it starts, right? Yeah. I went through a lot of foster care places first. I went through residential units, went through all different types of programs they put you in.
Yeah.
Put me in a therapeutic unit. That's where I met Norm over here.
And that's where I was honoured to be one of young Joe's carers, and to see him here today is a testament to who he is as a young man. But today's not about me. I really want to shed light on your journey and what you've been through, because you're a testament to the man that you are today.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's an awesome introduction.
I believe your parents were drug addicted parents.
Yeah.
Is that right? And you made pretty much in foster care throughout, and you spent years navigating a system that's too often fails to protect the vulnerable. He faced unimaginable abuse and adversity, but that's not where his story ends. Through discipline, self-belief, and an unbreakable commitment to fitness, he's rewritten his path from brokenness to becoming his own definition of strong inside and out. This young man has chosen growth over bitterness and built a future rooted in power and purpose. Joey, how do you feel about yourself now compared to where you were?
I'm proud of myself. I am, I know I still got a long way to go, but I see how far I've come, and, that makes me very proud.
Good man. Is there any embarrassing experience that you'd like to remind Norm of that maybe he's forgotten about? Anything that springs to mind?
Too many.
Too many to count.
Yeah, please.
Can I share the one that I shared the other night?
Yeah, go for it.
Because we went out for dinner, which we do. We're lucky enough we've reconnected over the past year or so, and I was telling Joey that there was a trip to Swan Hill to meet another child that was coming into our care. And I'll just pause there for a moment. I witnessed, when we talk about trauma with the kids that we looked after, Joey was one of them. But I can honestly say Joseph was such a humble and caring child, not only towards the other kids, but towards the workers. Yes, he was a very angry child. He was a very extremely angry child, and he would lash out with violence. But not for 1 second did I take that personally. And I'll get back to our trip to Swan Hill. I was driving a Ford Ranger, and Joseph was sitting in the back, and I saw this dirt track. And I said to Joe, that looks so fun. There was a big pothole full of water. And Joseph turned around and said to me, are you sure, Norm?
I knew it wasn't a good idea, even at that age.
Are you sure? I said, nah, fuck it, I'm going to do it. Yeah. So I've driven this Ford Ranger straight through the middle of it, which was like door trim high. And lo and behold, we were stuck there, Joe. do you want to continue?
We're stuck in the middle of nowhere, yeah?
Stuck in the middle. Do you want to take over the story from there?
All right. So Norm goes, Joey, do you want to jump out and like try to push the Ranger, right? And, you know, I was like, all right, I'll give it my best shot.
What's
So
that gonna do? It's like a fly landing on an elephant's ass, man.
exactly, right? So I jump out, you know, I'm trying to push it and I'm covered in mud, yeah, like head to toe, like full of mud, you know, and it's not working. Norm like starts revving it and it's just going all over me, you know, like
spraying 50 meters high of this mud water and he's just drenched.
and then, you know, we're stuck there, right? And then
How old were you then?
I would have been about 10, maybe 11, something like that.
What's a 10-year-old going to do pushing the car, man?
What can I say? I was a very responsible.
Definitely one of Norm's best moments, 100%. Yeah.
I knew. Something just made me ask that. I knew there would have to be stuff, yeah.
And so, you know, we went for a walk, you know, to try to find some help and
And
something.
mind you, we're in the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere, yeah.
No
like-
one there.
I couldn't even tell you where it was now. Yeah, it was the middle of nowhere. And then we actually found some guy, and he had a winch on his car, you know, and he helped us out, right? And after that, Norm was supposed to take me to visit my grandmother, yeah. And so he takes me to visit my grandma, and I'm fully like mud all over me and stuff like that. And she just looks at Norm, and she's like,
in your Christmas best.
yeah. And we get there, and my grandma just looks at Norm, and she's like, how about next time my grandson drives and you push? Yeah.
See that? She works you out. She worked you out.
That was a fun. When he wrote it on a Christmas card just a few weeks ago. When I read it, it took me back, you know, because I completely forgot about the whole, you know, ordeal.
I think that was meant to happen so that we sit here and talk about it and laugh at it.
Oh, that wasn't. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I feel so privileged to have looked after this young man. You know, I actually said to him the last time we caught up together, I said, I feel like I gained more out of the relationship. You taught me more about myself than I would have taught you. That's how I felt anyway, because I saw even back then as a 10-year-old boy how resilient and how determined you were to make things work. Even with your mother, yeah. Can I share the other story when
Go for it.
Your mother was in hospital because she had a burn on her leg. Did you want to elaborate on how she got the burn?
Or, you know, we grew up in a bad neighborhood and stuff, and some people broke in and, you know, they threw some acid on her leg. So she got you know, pretty bad burns and stuff like that. So I went to go visit her, you know, in hospital, and keep going.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the northern suburbs, you know, around like Broadmeadows, around those type of areas, right? So, yeah, it's a pretty shitty area, you know.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting, man? Like, why does a low socio-economic area have to be like that? You know what I mean? Like, just because the place is not worth much, you don't have to live like that. You know what I mean? It's just
it's a generation.
low frequency standards, low frequency.
'Cause everyone's just trying to survive.
environment.
Right?
I know, man. I know. Like, just because you live in a low socio-economic area, you don't have to be like that.
Yeah, you don't have to.
You know what I mean?
But survival brings out the worst.
I get
in
it.
people.
Environment. Two things shape us: nature and nurture.
Great point. And I want to pick your brain on that whole nature and nurture debate. Your father was an extremely violent person who was incarcerated and had his trials and tribulations with was it heroin?
Yeah, heroin's his drug of
Do
choice.
you still speak to him?
I try to see him as much as I can to make sure he's all right. You know, he's still that same person. You know, he's still, you know, drug addicted. He's still always, you know, doing violent things.
So has a place of residence or?
He just lives on the street mostly. Lives with like trap houses and with his friends and stuff like that. You know, so it's hard to see. You know,
Joey, just to get understanding, right? And I'm trying to ask because I have a son, and I think ahead. How does it make you feel knowing you have a drug addicted parent at this age, who prioritizes themselves over you?
You know, I'm a grown adult now, so like it's not that too bad for me personally, but I feel bad for him. You know, like I just wish that he could do better for himself. You know, and I try my best to help him, but what can I really do? You know, if someone's not ready to help themselves, then there's nothing you can really do. You can only lead people to the door. Like, whether they go through it, it's up to them, you know?
And when you sit with him, is he doing his best? Like, I know he's sidetracked with his addiction, but do you feel some sort of love from him, or at least he's
Yeah,
trying
he loves me, you know? I know he loves me, and, you know, he knows what he's doing is wrong. You know, it's not like he's doing these things and he thinks that's the right thing to do.
Can I share the desperation of your father? Last time we had a conversation, you
Yeah.
said that he cut his own fingers off so he can't shoot up.
Yeah, well, I don't think that was why he did it. I think he just, you know, he wasn't doing very well. He must have shot up at the time, you know, and then he went and played with a lawnmower or something like that, and he cut his fingers off.
He cut
you
his
know.
fingers.
What,
Okay.
what do you know about his childhood?
His childhood, I know that he come from a single parent household. You know, my grandmother, as a kid, was a prostitute, so he grew up, you know, not in a very good situation as well. You know, so I think as well that it makes it hard for him to be a dad if he doesn't really know what a dad really is, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've said this before in many podcasts, Joseph. I'm not sure if you know. I grew up in a loving home, and I was very street smart. But last 4 or 5 years, I've been introduced to a world that I didn't know existed. I can't say more than that, but it's my duty to kind of be very open of what I'm talking about and learn as much and to give back as much as I know, because to sit here with you, dude, it's a whole level of depth that I have to dive into, and I'm sitting here looking at you going, this guy has a level spirit. Like, that's the very, very hard thing to do given your background.
Can we just go back to, you know how we're talking about nature and nurture, right? Was there a time? Talk to me about the times we shared together at the farm. Can you break it down? How did you feel there?
I was a very angry kid. I was angry at the world because I didn't really understand, like, why I was there. Like, as much as my parents were bad people, I wanted to be with them, you know, like, those are the people that God chose to give me as parents, and, you know, I didn't think it was for anyone else to take me away from that. You know, I think, you know, at that time, I wanted to get away from where it was. I used to run away constantly, you know, every day.
Listen to those words, Dhamma. They were the people that God chose to make me to give me my parents.
Yeah.
Like,
I totally understand.
How much strength is there in that?
Well, you know what? When we talk about having a broken system, as from a worker's perspective, I felt like my hands were tied.
Yeah.
There were times that I just wanted to take you back to your family. Yeah.
100%. You know, behind closed doors, some of you did, you know, like,
Yeah.
sneak me out and try to get me, you know, help me in ways they could. But there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Like, your hands are tied.
I
right?
remember there were times there that, you know, I'd take you to Coburg just to, you know, for you to open the door so you can get out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And I just went, okay.
I'll tell you something. Norm bought me my first guitar.
So that Coburg incident,
Let me talk.
how no, to get an understanding, how old was you at that Coburg incident?
11 years old.
Okay, yeah.
11 years old. I was going to say, Norm bought me my first guitar, right? Back then, they would only give us a little bit of money for Christmas, yeah? But I really wanted a guitar. Yeah, I really wanted to play. I used to, like, you know, watch guitar stuff all the time, and I'd try practice on other people's guitars, but I never had my own one, right? And I asked Norm if he could get me one, and he got me one out of his own money, right? It was very generous of him, and, you know, he got in trouble over that, you know? They wouldn't let things like that happen there, you know, because another kid can get jealous, and then
Conflict of interest, yeah.
yeah, you're in conflict of interest. And so small things like that, the people that did want to help me, their hands were really tight, you know, like, there's only so much they could do.
And I suppose, like, when you're an empath, like Norm and myself, and I'm, by the way, regardless of whatever happens to me, I'll always be an empath. I don't have sympathy for people. I have empathy. Sympathy is weakness. Empathy is strength. It hurts when we can't help, and that's why we do what we do. Just to take the edge off Joey Nelma.
Yep.
Can you tell him what sort of a fucking idiot I was?
Well, you know what? I think I think that you did your best with what you were given. I honestly do.
Some adjectives, Norm.
Well, he got a chair put over his head in science class from myself. But yeah, no, look, you were always, you know, opinionated, and you knew who you were, right? So that's all I
Where
can
do
say.
you reckon that came from?
I think you had to because your parents left you at such a young age, and you were left to your own devices. So, I mean,
Do you know,
what do you think, Joe? I mean,
I think he has a strong spirit, you know,
Yeah,
and sometimes
definitely.
you got to make mistakes before
Joey?
you can learn from it.
Do you know? I'll tell you. Just do you know what's scary? Now just reminded me. Yeah, he left. My parents left me at a young age. Do you know what's scary? I actually thought nothing of it. I couldn't wait for them to leave so I can go out and party, right? But it really, really hit me from about 18 onwards. I did start feeling abandoned.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew they loved me, like no doubt, the love was there. But as I became 18, I'm not 15 anymore. It's like, fuck, this is the business end now, right? And I grew up with massos, and they were living at home, and I was renting, and they were buying their kids brand new cars, and I got nothing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That hurts, right? But
so you can only imagine what Joe felt like being.
I definitely
in
know what it
care.
feels
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
in care, and there were times that I had to go and take you to visit your family, right? How did you feel about that?
You know, I was just happy that I could see them, you know, like even if it was in small times like that, you know, just for a small time, a small amount of time, you know, but, you know,
Yeah.
I got to appreciate what I do have, you know, not what I don't. That's what I try to look at, you know.
I'll tell you, man,
got
I
times to
felt,
see
I
that.
felt really awkward, you know, telling you that, oh, you know what, Joe, our time's up. You know, it broke my
Yeah, it'd
heart.
be if I try to put myself in your shoes, it would be hard for me to do too, you know.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't like to do that, you know.
No.
But
tell us a little bit what life looks like for you today.
today, you know, I have a full-time job. I go train fighting, like boxing and kickboxing every day. I'm very fit. I go to the gym every day. I think I'm very lucky, you know. I have a calm mind, a fit body, I have friends that love me, and I love them, you know. I'm very happy now, you know, in life compared to when I was a little kid.
So the ancient Greeks, so you got everything you pretty much need, and the ancient Greeks say all you need is a home, a garden, and a library.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think I got all of that.
you
Yeah.
won't be far from getting all them. I'm sure of it. So generally speaking, when you first meet people, say you meet a new girl or whatever, do you go into your past much, or is it?
I like to keep my stuff sort of private usually, you know, unless like I find some reason that maybe it could help them. If I tell them that's more part of my life, then I normally just leave it, you know, because people, they take things differently. You don't know how they're gonna understand it or what it's gonna mean to them, right? But some people I open up to, you know, some people I don't, you know. Just it really depends on how close of a relationship I have with that specific person.
It's a real fine line. I get what you're saying, because if someone asks you a question and you want to answer it truthfully, right?
Yeah.
But there's a flip side to that, because you don't want to bring their spirit down, or you don't want to sound like, you know, you're sitting on the pity potty.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. And it's important. It's important to plan for this stuff, or I suppose have a set of personal guidelines for yourself. You know, you talked about being in the system and coming from a really tough home life. What do you remember most about it? Like, if you had to paint a picture, what's it like for a kid when you're actually in that system, or at the farm, for example?
It's, you know, I think it's a lot like the prison system, you know, like I couldn't do much of anything that I wanted to do, you know. I couldn't have friends outside of there. I couldn't go out and just do things on my own like other kids could do. I couldn't go to the park and play with my friends or whatever.
You go to
know.
school, right? You go to school?
There, they had like a small
so you-
school.
you don't
but
go
I
to-
couldn't go to a proper school, no. That was something I really wanted to do, you know, as a guy.
And towards the end, you went to the Coburg Community
Yeah,
School.
towards the end when I was about 15, 16, I had to fight for that for like,
That
you know,
must be
yeah.
hard, man.
Yeah.
It was.
That
you know, it
must
was.
be hard, because
Yeah.
for me to sit here with my high school friend and knowing you missed out on that, that's not easy for me to digest.
Yeah, it
man.
was hard, you know. Like a lot of my friends, you know, they got there to sit there and learn. Like, I don't want to be here at school, and I really did want to be there. You know, like, I didn't feel the same way they felt. You know? I wished I could go.
Joseph, you were quite talented young man. Yeah, you had interests in music and drawing, and you drew on them, and you were quite passionate about those. And I don't feel that we allowed you to expand on that part of your education. You know what I mean? It was always a money driven. Oh, we don't have the funds for that, and
Yeah, it was very money driven.
Yeah.
Very money driven.
and I'm really sorry that we couldn't do more for you, man.
Thank you. It's not your fault there, right? You know, like, you tried your best. Like, you know, how many other people like you that I know that tried their best too? You know, like, you can only do so much, right?
Yeah.
Joey, I'm a big believer in the best medicine you'll ever have in the world is exercise. And I also believe in staying away from processed food and, most importantly, processed people.
Yeah.
Tell me what exercise means to you. Yeah, tell me, and how important in your opinion, is exercise to anyone that wants to turn their life around?
All those things you just said are important to me. You know, eating the right food. Because your body is connected to your mind. You know, if your body's not doing well, then your mind's not going to do well, right? So, I try to go to the gym every single day. Maybe I have a couple rest days here and there. You know, but getting sweating and getting your blood moving and stuff like that, like it's a natural remedy. You know, like a lot of people, they try to look for these pills and everything else that can try to fix their problems, but I think that's the best way to fix your problems, is to go and work on your body and work on your mind and your spirit.
Yeah,
And also, we recently spoke about your faith.
Yeah.
How's that helped you in your healing?
Faith is one of the biggest things for me. Like I always, in the darkest times, I always turn to God. I always, try to pray for better times and ask him, for forgiveness for the things that I do wrong. Because no one's perfect, right? Like we all make mistakes. I made mistakes too. And I just talk to him, and he's always there. I'm not alone.
And clearly it works, yeah.
It does.
I'm telling, dude. If you spoke to me in 2020, oh yeah, God, God, I believe in God, but God actually came to me and pulled me out the gutter, bro.
Yeah.
Dude, if you understand where I started, like I started from below zero, and I did nothing. I did nothing special. I did nothing that most guys wouldn't do. I just believed there was a divine intervention. Believe me. And like you said before, and like I said to you about Musashi, seek nothing external. Everything starts and ends within.
Yeah,
it's all here. When
the ancient Greeks said, "Know thyself."
Yeah, yeah. So, what goes through your head these days? You want it that you want to give up. Sorry, what goes through your head on the days when you want to give up or fall back?
I always think about it's not just me that I'm giving up on if I do that, right? There's other people that look up to me, they rely on me, and they think of me when they're gonna do bad. So if I give up, I'm not just giving up on myself, I'm giving up on all those people. So
I've got a classic example of that when you shared the video message of your friend that you train with, wishing you a happy birthday and speaking so highly of you and saying, thanks for, your words of wisdom and thank you for believing in me,
Exactly, right?
Yeah, it was awesome. He was was he Lebanese?
He's Turkish.
Turkish, young
awesome
Turkish
kid,
guy.
awesome kid,
Yeah,
love him. But people like that, they give me hope, I gotta try my best, for them.
There's nothing more beautiful than hanging out with people with heart, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Not material, heart.
Exactly.
And speaking of heart, let's go back to those young hearts at the farm. What do you think the younger kids in the system or at the farm need that they're not getting?
A lot of it's very money based, as Norm said. So if they had a lot more funding, I'm sure they'd be able to do a lot more. But a lot of them, they just need like somebody to talk to. Like they're very angry people, and they need somebody that's not just there for a paycheck. A lot of people aren't like Norm. A lot of people are just, like when you go to work, you want to clock on and you want to clock off. Like you want to try to do sometimes the least amount of things that you can. Because you're just trying to get your money. Like.
And just while we're talking about that, I want to help out as much as I can with this. So our show is very, very general here. I'm trying to help as many people as we can. It's general but specific in some ways. Please, guys, again, this is not about me, Norm, or Joey. If you think we add value for what we're doing, please support us, like and subscribe and share. Because when I hear stories of what Joey's saying about the funding that it needs, I'd like to help out in some way, shape, or form. Joey, do you run?
I run every day.
I'll tell you, I've got a little window of opportunity for you here, a little gift from me to you today. So I did a 21K Spartan race. This is the first one I did, the 10K one. So I did it for my friend Lenny, who's on my previous podcast. And Spartan, Lenny's in a wheelchair, so we carried him for 21Ks. And Spartan were very good to us. They came up at the end and said they'll pay for our tickets they'll support us to do all the Spartan races in Australia. And he's on the journey to be the first disabled person to do all the Spartan races in Australia. So I'd like to support him, the team, and and Spartan as much as I can. But I'm sure the boys would love to have you there.
That sounds awesome.
And I'm sure they're good boys, and you'll be in great company. And if I put you there, it gives me hope because I know someone else. One day you'll put someone else there.
Yeah,
so the same way the cycle of trauma has been relayed to us, we have a choice to drop that baton or pick up that baton.
Yeah.
There's the healthy baton and then there's the unbaton baton. I can't stand people that make trauma their business card.
Yeah.
Right? But I love people that make trauma their gift. These are the people.
You know, someone told me like the difference between superheroes and supervillains. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Usually they both have the same story. Something traumatic happens to them, you know, like, you know, Batman's, you know, I think his dad died, right? And then, but some of the supervillains, it happens to them and they say, oh, I'm going to make this happen to everybody else. But the superheroes, it happens to them and they say, I'm going to make sure this never happens to anybody else.
That.
Dude, look, there are some parents out there that have the most horrible things happen to them. And as sickening as this is their attitude. Well, if it happened to me, it's going to happen to my kids.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm talking the most sickening things that I can't mention. And so, yeah, I'm going to speak to the boys. And please, if you can donate, and we'll get the details up. We'll get the details up online. There's a GoFundMe page. Yeah, I'd love to get Joey on there, and you know, I just want to help people. I just want to help people that at some point have felt like Joey, Norm, myself, or whoever's in the suck, because this is all about showing people. Look at Joey, pretty much on his own.
Yep.
Myself, pretty much on my own. But when I say I was on my own, look, I must admit I've got the best friends in the world. I've got beautiful people around me, and you know, and I like to think I've been pretty good to them. But it's not about me anymore. It's about not even my kids. It's about other people's kids, and you know, anyone, grandparents. That's another one of my pet hates. Grandparents, you know, they get lugged with the burden of, you know, of grandchildren. Your vision and your voice. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
It's hard for me to plan 5 years ahead, honestly, you know, like so much has changed in my life in just I'm only 24, you know, so it's been a very
Tell us a little bit
time.
more about like where you're living. You mentioned that you're living with your mum. How's that been for you?
It's good, you know, but it's hard sometimes, you know. I'm trying to help her, and I need to help myself too, you know.
Yeah.
It's hard to help yourself and somebody else at the same time, you know. So
yeah, and can you elaborate on that? What struggles is your mum going through at the moment?
She just got depression, and she's still addicted to a few drugs, you know. So I'm trying to get that out of the house. I'm trying to help her, you know, move around more, you know, try to get her to the gym and try to use some of the things that I've learned to fix myself and try to teach her those things. Right?
Yeah.
How old is she now?
She would be about 45.
She's young.
Yeah, she's pretty young.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Just to lighten the mood a little bit, I remember a story going back to when your mum was burned with the acid. You were a young man, and even though you were going through this adversity, you were able to laugh your way through it. And I thought that was a big strength of yours. Or do you know what I'm going to say?
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Go on,
so we jump on the elevator, like in the hospital, and we're going up to see my mum, and some guy jumps in the elevator with us, you know, some random guy, and he just says, like, he looks at me and Norman, he's like, is that your son? And I go, nah. Norman goes, nah. And he goes, well, I thought it was because you both just have really big heads, you know? And I was like,
Masso, no surprises there.
Blockhead.
Look at his head.
Yeah.
Look at it.
Just as a learning curve, as a learning curve, if he takes off from you on a visit,
Yes.
how bad do you cop it?
I'll have to write a report about it.
But do you get grilled, sort of thing? Or?
Yeah.
But you're not in control. He can take off whenever he wants.
Well, you have to justify it.
No, but he's young, right?
Yeah.
You're not as fit as him. You're taking him to the hospital. He just runs off on you.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wanted him to run away. I wanted him to run away and see his family. Like.
Okay.
Okay.
So obviously you had some sort of hope in him, right? But let's say,
of course.
Yeah. But let's say a kid that's, you know, this. Like, how bad?
Well, you know what? I can give you specific examples. I remember looking after another child, and she wasn't like Joseph. She had a shard of glass in her pocket and pulled it out and tried to slice me up with it. Well, at that point, you have to say to yourself, well, I have a family too, and I want to go home, and you have to disengage.
How old?
And how old was she when that happened? She was 13.
Joey, man, it kills me. Like, I don't know, man. I've learnt why people are the way they are, but I'll never justify it on their behalf.
Yeah.
You know, we have a duty to shut that down, and I'm not talking going around, you know, with our fists, you know, with our words, and more importantly, with what you're doing with embodying. You know what I mean? So, dude, I'm actually seeing guys like you gives me hope, right? Because, yeah. And ladies, by the way, we've got a good-looking bloke here. I know you're single. I'm not gonna. I don't. That doesn't sit too well with me. So, just reach out.
I'm
Reach
single
out.
by choice.
Yeah, you're interviewing, right? Yeah. Hey, women interview us, girls, ladies. Do you not? So we have the right to interview too.
Joseph, I don't think we explained the setting that you lived in for the best part of
I think it was about 4 to 5 years.
4 to 5 years, which was Hurstbridge Farm. It was an out of home care setting, but it was quite unique in that it was on 33 acres of farmland, and it was split between 2 houses. Can you tell us your experiences of the farm, what you really loved about it, who you connected with? You can even mention names. You know, it would be good for us. Yeah, tell us.
You know, that's where I met you.
Yeah.
You know, so you know,
Good luck with that.
you know, thank God for that. You know,
And we have shared some stories with that.
Yeah, exactly.
But were there any other workers or?
Yeah, there was plenty of workers there. You know, a lot of people. Some of them I still see now. I go to dinners with them and stuff, and
Yeah.
you know, they're very proud of the person I've become. You know, so I met a lot of good people there. You know, some of the kids there weren't the best. You know, but none of us were. You
Was
know,
it easy to escape for a kid?
Not from that place. Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why they
So it's
put me
like
there.
literally like
It's in
fencing.
the middle of Whoopwood.
No,
like-
but fencing or no?
No, there was no fencing. But you know, there'd be carers watching you all the time and stuff like that, and they'd try their best to chase you and catch you and stuff. You know, and they have.
Did you think about it?
Of course, I try every single day. I wake up and go. That's it. Yeah, every single day. You know.
I see, miss school and all that.
Well, there was a school there,
Yeah.
and that was it. You know. So yeah, I'd run away from that school and just I wanted to go home. You know, and that was at the forefront of my mind. I tried to do it every other
Going
day.
back to specifics, which were the people that really stood out to you at the farm?
You know, like I had my key worker Emma,
Yeah.
I had Dan. You know, I really loved them. Bernie, I love Bernie. You know, Ange, I used to love Tati. You know, there was a lot of good people.
Samantha.
You know, Samantha.
Yeah.
You know, all the people who have dinners.
What did they provide for you, and how were they different from the other people that just worked at the farm?
Well, most of them you could just tell they cared, right? You know, and they used to do different things to show me they cared. You know, like Samantha used to always cook me food and stuff like that. You know, Dan used to teach me about all types of stuff. He'd teach me about guitar. He'd teach me how to sing. He'd teach me all those type of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
so everyone had like a small different reason why I liked them. You know, because
I'm gonna take you to a very specific time in your life at Hurstbridge Farm, and I want you to stop me if I've overstepped the bounds. And this was an extremely difficult period for me as a worker as well. And I've never really told you this, but it was the period that you were living in the bungalow.
yeah.
Can you remember that?
Yeah, I
That's-
remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
yeah. Would you like to unpack that with me, or?
Well, you know, the bungalow, I learned to like it, you know,
Yeah.
because I wanted to be on my own, you know. I didn't like living with the kids in the other house and stuff like that. And so they had like little bungalows around the units, and, you know, I forced it, being able to live in one of those, you know.
Yeah.
So I ended up growing to like it, you know, because I was on my own, you
Yeah.
know. But I was pretty lonely at times, you know, like
Yeah.
So, Joe, where was your brother?
my brother, he lived with my grandmother at the time.
So why were you?
Just, you know, the luck of the draw.
That's a really good question. How did you feel about that?
You know, like it wasn't like I wasn't mad at my family, you know, because they didn't have room for me. They couldn't look after me and stuff like that. But especially my brother, I really affected him a lot, you know, because he couldn't be with me, you know. He had to go to school.
In saying that, why do you think? What was the purpose of you being at the farm? What do you think they provided for you?
Not that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know.
Look, you're saying the issue was space, right? Because you couldn't live.
Well, because they didn't want me to live with my parents, you know. So my brother went to my grandparents' house.
And so if your grandparents had the room, you would have lived with your grandparents?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the issue then became space, right?
Yeah.
But I thought they don't break children up. I thought they keep siblings together.
No, they definitely break them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely break them up.
So that's interesting because in the family law courts they don't like to break children up.
So do you believe that in the whole scheme of things, that I know that you hated being broken up from your brother, but do you believe that the farm was a good place? Or
I believe overall, you know, like they tried their best. Like their heart was in the right place. You know what I'm saying? And people can only do so much.
So the purpose of the farm was to make sure you had an education, facilitate family access with your mother and your grandmother. Do you think that we did that well?
I think you did that, especially compared to residential units and stuff like that. I was in a lot of those before.
But
It was
there was
much
a lot.
better.
There's still a lot to learn from in that setting.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. You know, the rules were changing there every single day. You know, so
Yeah.
it was always getting better and worse, and you know,
Yeah.
things were a bit all over the place. You know, it wasn't.
And
very structured.
it wasn't a conventional home environment. There was it was an institution, right?
Yeah, it was the institution. Yeah, you know.
Joey, how did you deal with significant days like Easter, Christmas?
Those were pretty hard, you know. Christmas, you know, they actually let me go and see my family on Christmas, you know, but I know a lot of other kids couldn't see their family and that was hard, you know. I think at the start they didn't want to let us go see that, but they were very like, you know, what do we do? Some kids can go, some kids can't. Other days, you know, like Easter and stuff like that, I had to stay there, I couldn't see my family. It was pretty hard, you know, like I wanted to be with them and I couldn't.
Because
You know?
as a grown man, I remember we were kicked out of our house, and even though I'm Muslim, I still like to celebrate Easter, as in, you know, hang out with the family.
Yeah, and friends.
And
yeah.
that used to break me.
Yeah, it was hard.
And I had my kids under my roof,
It was
and
hard.
it still hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back briefly to the bungalow situation, I think you know what I'm going to say. Where do you remember the breakdown of that? Do you remember what?
Not really.
You know? Oh, so I'll remind you. Yeah, I think you were smoking chuff in there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so you're smoking chuff in there, and
How are you getting it?
I used to have like, you know, friends on the outside that sneak it in and stuff like that. you
Oh,
know?
they'll drive and drop it off.
Yeah, I had a lot.
or
of,
he'd
lot of
go
friends.
when he'd run away.
When I'd run away, I'd get it. Yeah, I'd hide it. I had ways when I was a
So-
kid, you know.
So our hands, because we're a government organisation, our hands were tied. Yeah, we couldn't allow that to happen. Yeah, like as much as you know, we wanted to turn a blind eye to it. We had to say something because all the other kids knew about it, and we had to set an example that we weren't going to tolerate that, and it turned into violence. Can you remember?
Yeah.
I can definitely remember because
Yeah, definitely
really-
did go down well.
it
From
really
from
hurt
you?
me. Yeah, because you were a big boy too. You were like 13 and you were thick set and you didn't take. I mean, looking back at it now, I think what we did, how we tackled it, was absolutely wrong. Because three of us came up. It was myself, Lawrence, and Adelaide, and it was like we almost evicted you from your own home, and I'd just like to apologise for that. Yeah,
It's in the past.
yeah.
You know.
But no, but I'm saying that that's something that I've held on to for a really long time, and the violence that erupted as a result of how we tackled that. You know,
I was very upset as well because I hurt people I didn't want to hurt.
I know,
and
and I
broke
know
things
that.
I didn't
And that's
wanna
why you're here, bro.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's all part of
But you know what? I never took it personally, and I promised Joe, I always loved Joe like you are my own child, and I knew that you were acting out of almost.
What do you knew? Yeah,
No, it's like, oh my God, this is my last home, and you want to kick me out of that type of thing. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it was like the only thing I really thought I had, you know, and so
Joey, it's an interesting point you make, Norm, and one of the questions I want to ask and the message I want to get out, because we've all been stupid. I mean, I'm still
Absolutely.
stupid now, right?
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
But I remember being young, and the shit that we used to do, right? Like, I won't mention where, but you know, one night
We've all been kids
no,
before, right?
one night we were somewhere, we won't mention, and one of our friends decided to throw a rock somewhere, right?
Yeah, so because we
Right.
don't want to incriminate
No,
ourselves, do we?
but like the shit we done, right? My point is, I want to try to save some person's life out there, right? Because when I see a young kid getting stabbed, like your friend the other day at the station, or that,
Yep.
you know, what upsets me the most. If they met each other in the real world, they probably would have been best mates, right? So, what do you say to young kids out there that want to snap,
Yeah.
that want to break?
Just think about it, you know. Think about things before you do them, you know. Like,
But you don't understand, Joey. My mum, my dad, and this and that. My sister, this guy hurt me.
there's always going to be something, but there's always going to be some reason for you to go and do those bad things. You know what I'm saying? But like, how's it going to affect you in the future? You know, are you going to be proud of yourself when you do those things?
And I think that's what the farm did well. They planted that seed and said, "Hey, you know what I mean? You're angry at the moment, but your actions in this current situation can reflect what happens to you for the next 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
So you need to really think twice before you act." And I thought that we, as a group of individuals looking after young people, I thought we did that well.
Yeah, definitely. But most of you did. You
Yeah.
know?
Joey, just from listening, like it sounds like you had, even though you had the stuff you were dealing with, you were kind of gravitating to a higher purpose somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You must have been.
I knew it was
Yeah.
like, you know, all smart, part of like a larger journey. You know what I mean? Like, it was
because
just
there's no way you could be here if you were completely empty. Do you know what I mean? Like with me, where I am now, it's because at some point when I was a kid, I felt something that was going to get me here, even though I had my shit. So I kind of think that you had God in you from a young age. You know,
I knew.
you had
I
a
knew what I
higher
was doing.
purpose. Put God aside for a sec, but you felt a higher purpose as a
Yeah,
kid.
I always did. I
So
knew I
even
was
though
meant for more
your
than-
parents weren't there, you found a way to kind of fill your heart.
Yeah. And I still do that now.
Yeah.
I still, you know, try my best with everything I do, try to work out what my purpose here is. You know, I mean, I still haven't found it yet, you know, but I know I'm meant for, you know, better things than that. And
You actually lived with one of your previous farm brothers, I can almost say.
Yeah. I lived with him for, you know, I just moved out maybe
Chris
6 months ago.
Gibson, which I recently had the privilege of meeting up again, and he seems to have done pretty well for himself as well.
Yeah. So you know what? I actually crashed a motorbike like maybe a year ago, and I broke my back. All right, and he was there straight away. You know, he was there and he helped me, and you know, he took my bike away and he brought me into his house. You know, so I lived with him for 6 months.
Can you,
know,
tell
while I
that,
was
can you
healing.
tell that funny story about, was it his girlfriend or something hitting a kangaroo or something?
Oh yeah, because his girlfriend picked me up, you know, like after I broke my back, you know, and then we went to the hospital, and then I left the hospital because I didn't want to be there, you know, and I needed to
broken
go
back?
back. Yeah, I had a broken back. Yeah.
How do you leave a broken back?
Well, I got out and walked out, you know what I
What
mean?
about the pain?
It hurt, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to be there. Like I was, you know, scared and all that kind of stuff, you know. And I basically crawled out of there, you know. And he was trying to force me back there the whole time. You know, I went home and I was still in pain and all that stuff, you know. And then eventually I agreed to go back, right? So his girlfriend, she drove us, right? And on the way she hit a kangaroo. Yeah,
That's Hurstbridge, man.
yeah. No, it was actually
North.
It was the north side, yeah. And then
South Morang, all those places, yeah.
what Norm wanted me to tell you, because I told him the other day, she hit the kangaroo, and then she got all like, you know, scared. She wanted to check on the kangaroo and stuff like that. And Chris just looks at her and he goes, you know, don't worry about that, Joey. What about this, Joey? You know?
I want to just take you back to, is there is there a particular moment? Because I believe people, like I always say to people, someone says to me, I hate my job, I fucking hate my job. It's like, no, you don't hate your job, man. Because if you really hated your job, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're talking about like a turning point.
Yeah. So my point is, what was that moment? It was there. I mean, there may not have been. May have been a series of moments, a series of, little things that you remember. What was the moment you thought, fuck this, I'm doing something here?
You know, one of the biggest moments that sticks out to me was I used to be a drug dealer, right, before my first job, because my dad was a drug dealer. That's all I really knew how to do. I was the only one I knew how to make money.
From what age?
from, as long as I can remember.
Far out.
So I just sit down, I sell drugs all the time. Then somebody gave me a weed plant, right? And so I started growing the weed plant.
At the farm?
No, this was after the farm.
Yeah.
So I was about 15, 16, I was with my grandma. And I was growing the weed plant, and I was sitting there and I was putting all my time into it, and I was just trying to get all the things to make it grow better and, all the lights and all that kind of stuff, right? And then I just sat there and I was like, why am I spending all this time and energy trying to do it for a plant? Like, what about me?
Wow. That's so insightful, man.
And then,
For a 15-year-old kid.
And then, so I did that, I threw the plant away, I stopped, and I started doing that to my stuff. I started making sure I was eating the right food, started making sure that I had the light that I needed, not the bloody plants,
Wow. It's massive.
Dude, if we don't get this as a snippet, then there's something seriously wrong with us. Joey, it's funny, just on drugs as a young person, I went down a dark path too, and it took me a long time to avoid that life. And, here's what I said to myself. What used to break me, I'll tell you, is knowing what I was doing the night before and then rocking up to a family barbecue and trying to look my uncle in the eye and give him a hug and kiss. That used to break me. When my martial arts instructor, who I love and respect, when I'd shake their hand knowing what I've been up to.
Yeah.
So if you're a man and you can't shake someone's hand or hug someone and look them in the eye and with pure love, then you're not a man.
Yeah.
So that's why that life and what everyone's attracted to, there's many people that have shows about all that. Here's my little spiel on that. There's no better feeling in the world than enriching someone's life, right? Nothing. No better feeling in the world. When you live that life, if you only just put it to a worthy goal from a young age, like let's say at 20 years old or 15, you thought, that's it. I'm going to do something. And I'll use the word Andrew Tate for a sec, right? Whilst I disagree with a lot of his stuff on women, some he has merit and some
Just like all of us.
yeah,
right?
I disagree. And you speak to anyone in the world, you're going to disagree with someone and you're going to agree with someone. I believe when it comes to business and mentality and the importance of being a man and fighting, he's the pinnacle, right? He's the top of the echelon. In fact, I will say this openly, because I'm a single dad, right? I have to have conversations with my kids, in particular my son, that if I don't wake up tomorrow, you go to Nelma for certain conversations, you go to this person for this conversations, you go to Andrew Tate for just about everything. Because he says he was a drug dealer, he says I was a piece of shit. The words, the wisdom that he talks about,
Especially for young men. He
yeah,
does have good wisdom.
and he doesn't have to be doing what he's doing,
No, of course not.
right? I don't disagree with. I do think he's got. Like I don't care about the Bugattis and all that bullshit. To me, that's meaningless bullshit. And here's the flip side. Yes, great, Andrew, you're a millionaire. That's great, but don't go on too much about that because there are other guys that put you in their little back pocket. So, in terms of money. So, but I do understand what he's trying to do, and I do understand his passion, and Joey, and go for the world, right? Go get everything. But here's my advice, and I'm sure you're already over this. Take the highs. Go get the car. Go get the house. Go get the woman. But don't take them if you can't handle the lows. So when God gives you the highs, you got to be prepared that any one point, as you know, can be taken away anytime.
Yeah, it's like a wave,
It's a wave. And like I said, the waves of sorrow, they'll keep crashing, but you have to be like the rock in those waves, always standing erect.
Was there anything that you wanted to ask me about, like the Hurstbridge Farm days that you've held on to, or?
Not specifically. I can think of off the top of my head. I should have wrote down some questions before I came here. What do you think about it now? When you hear about the stories, because you don't work there, but I know you talk to a lot of people that work there and stuff.
Well, I can see that a lot of people have grown frustrated with the bureaucracy, the rules of everything, and I think they're becoming more rigid. And they claim to be this therapeutic setting, and yet I hear nowadays that the kids aren't allowed to go into the paddocks like we were used to go. There was
What's the point of even living on a farm at that point, huh?
Exactly, yeah. My sentence, exactly. And I think that's coming from a place of litigation and they're scared that, the kids are going to sue them or anything. But
yeah.
when you're cautious like that, the kids don't get the best care, because you've got this environment that is like natural and beautiful, and you're not allowing these kids to be in it.
Yeah.
You're saying to them, you can look at it, but don't go in it,
Yeah.
and it's just like counterproductive for me.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, that sucks. You know what I mean? It's like you're looking at it and you can't go on it. That's even worse than just not having it there. You know what I mean? Like, imagine that.
But I have really fond memories of the farm, and mainly because of the kids that I looked after, and certainly some of the staff that were there that to this day that I still have close relationships with.
Me too. I always try to look at the bright times and not the dark times.
Exactly.
Like, always.
Yeah.
Joey, if you can go back to those dark times about the violent incidents and stuff, what's your advice on how to avoid it in the system? What builds up that frustration, and what can the system do to be proactive? Let's say we had the financial backing, for example, or the resources. What could we do to deflate those situations or diffuse them?
It's hard because I'd say talking to somebody and stuff like that. But I had therapists and stuff when I was going. I didn't want to borrow from.
You're not ready.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. And we love the ancient Greeks. They say when the student's ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah,
that's
definitely
right.
But I think maybe giving them some of those like more freedom of of opportunities and stuff. Let them go out and let them.
I was just thinking, what about going to school? Like, why can't they go to school?
Exactly.
Why can't they go to schools, Norm? Why can't they go to school?
Well, I think I'm not talking about Joey, because Joey is quite a bright young man, and he didn't have that visible. I'm sure he did, but he didn't have that trauma underlay, and it didn't present. Whereas I think a lot of the kids, and I think you can vouch for this, Joey, they had
It's clear.
Yeah,
they
a lot
had
of them,
intellectual
they couldn't be
disabilities.
Well, not even just intellectually, like from trauma and stuff like that. They couldn't be in
So
the
school,
and they couldn't be in a setting. I'm not saying that was you, because you were quite
No,
bright.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
So I think what we did was we tried our best to provide a school setting on the farm, because we tried with other kids, and
That's the
we
thing.
just
Kids are
set
individuals,
them
right?
up to fail almost. Yeah,
Norm, I was just thinking probably the best thing we can do is keep having these conversations.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Keep spreading the message, keep fighting the good fight, keep embodying what we're trying to achieve. And because that's nipping in the bud. If I can teach Joey, or not teach, if I can, try to embody what I expect my son to be, I'm sure Joey's and everyone else is going to gravitate to it. The better quality people who attract in his life. And just on that, I had to ask you a question about. I know I attracted certain partners in my life because of my traumas.
Yeah.
Without getting personal, what sort of women have you attracted before?
I've definitely attracted people that were my first girlfriend after I left the farm was a DHS worker, and she knew how to mess with my head a lot, like I was a traumatic person, so I attracted a traumatic partner, so
I had to ask that question, man. It's such a powerful question, and it's actually a big message here in this. What did you learn about yourself after that?
I learned that I have to have boundaries, you know what I'm saying? Like I need to be like who I am and not who somebody else wants me to be, you know what I'm saying? Like
I'm sure you already know this, Joey, and I have to tell you this, and it's not cruel, it's actually kind. If you're not feeling it, you owe them nothing but respect.
Yeah.
Walk away. Because like I said to you, the reason why it's called Chaddy issues, for years, right, I didn't know what Chaddy issues were or daddy issues, right? I was made to pay for daddy issues, right? Yeah, Chaddy had issues, but Chaddy pays for Chaddy issues. Don't you ever pay for daddy issues.
Yeah.
And no one should be paying for mummy issues. That's the message. Everyone wipes their own ass in this world, the world would be a better place. So yeah, Joey, we can go on for hours, but what an incredible conversation. It's not every day that you meet someone who's walked through fire and come out stronger, someone who's taken everything life threw at them and turned it into a fuel for growth. And when I look at you, I don't see PTSD, I see PTSG, post-traumatic growth. They never let anyone tell you you got PTSD, you have PTSG. And by the way, you're talking to Chad GPT or Asafiri Intelligence. Joey Melbro, thank you for your honesty, your heart and strength. Your story is a reminder that we are not defined by where we come from, but by what we choose to become. To anyone out there listening who feels stuck, broken, or alone, let this episode be proof that rock bottom isn't the end. Sometimes it's a foundation to something unshakable. And when you're on this journey, man, like, there's no amount of money in the world that will give you the feeling. We're designed to move forward. We should never be content. That's for chickens and pigs. And of all the animals, the man is the hardest to tame. But let me tell you, Joey, when you work on yourself, everything comes to you, man.
Yeah, it does.
And don't, if I could tell myself one thing, I always say this to my son: don't be a fucking idiot like me and chase women. Build it, and everything will come.
Someone said to me, like, if you chase butterflies, they just fly away, right? But if you sit there and make a nice garden, the butterflies come.
It's true, man. It's true, isn't it? Joey.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank Joseph for coming in today. I personally, what I got out of working at Hurstbridge Farm, I grew as a person, and I think that one positive is that we had a trauma-informed community that, at their core values, loved the children that they looked after, and had their best interests at heart. Although at times it didn't come across that way, we always had your best interests at heart, Joey, and I hope that you got that from my care towards you.
Everyone could think like you. I wish them, there was a lot of good ones there too,
Yeah.
But there was definitely a lot of trash workers, a lot of the people that come from, secure welfare and stuff like that, they're not there for the same reasons you are.
No, it's they definitely had a different framework. They come from a custodial background, yeah. And that's not what we were. We weren't a prison. We were a family. Yeah.
Joey, a diamond can't be perfected without friction, nor a man without trials.
Yeah.
And there's no braver sight in the world than a man, let alone a young man, fighting against adversity. You should be very proud of yourself, my friend. And on that note, thank you for listening to Chaddy Issues. And I'm going to say this one more time, please. Guys, please support, like, and share, because this is not about us. We genuinely want to give back, and I can do this for the rest of my life. And the Spartan guys, if you can please get Joey on board, and we'll share the details for the GoFundMe page. And thank you for listening to another episode of Chaddy Issues.
Just 1 second. Was there any last comments that you wanted to make?
No, that sounds pretty good.
No?
And maybe we'll make another part.
100%. He knows that. Thank you for listening to another episode of Chaddy Issues, where you worry about your issues and Chaddy will worry about Chaddy issues, and together we can make things grow.
Awesome. Thanks, Chuck.
I'm busting to go to the toilet. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Chaddy.
Yeah, really good.